People see the evidence I'm pointing to regarding the flat earth, and some of them get it. Some people will state they know that I'm wrong and point to the programming as evidence, which is very strong indeed. But if responded to correctly, then that person is rational. He or she will certainly agree that there are some interesting points about the flat earth model, which make a lot of sense, and also explain the contradictions galore in the globe model theory. But what about the programming? People who have never been introduced to MK Ultra, PsyOps, Monarch mind control, etc., will think programming is something only found in science fiction films, or even worse, that it's a general term for the stuff we can see on TV at a given time. Honey, the programming's on, let's watch Honey Boo Boo. That's my favorite program, etc. I often wondered why people called their favorite shows their programs. Perhaps this was a Freudian slip, their subconscious trying to tell them something not apparent to their waking, quote, rational mind. The programming is rather obvious to our subconscious. The garbage shoveled into our mind via the television waves is inherently altering the way we think, or the ideas we subscribe to. Indeed, the programming is a very suitable word for it, and it is very potent indeed. Day after day, year after year, the programming has essentially remained the same if you're not paying attention. If you inspect the, quote, evolution of the programming, it's actually gotten more intense in its effect, sharper in its mediums, and ever deeper into the subconscious minds of the masses and ever younger audiences targeted. Oh, and let's not forget the ever more perverse, but also effective as the years go by. It's commonplace for a child to see a full-on naked chick doing the reverse cowgirl in a cartoon with a cute little mouse or whatever, or getting a good long look at Jessica Rabbit's nether regions. We're told to think it's just a couple of perverted artists having a laugh, but in reality there are very specific reasons subconsciously to expose children to repeated displays of perversion. The groups that produce and distribute cartoons are run by the very same people who meet secretly behind closed doors with the executives in bed with the military-industrial complex. Walt Disney is a prime example of this. He was so tied in with the military-industrial machine, just like all the other major distributors of videos and music. People think this is all just a conspiracy theory. However, if you give the topic even a cursory glance, you'll find that these groups such as Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, etc., spend ridiculous amounts of money on producing content designed to control our collective consciousness and our collective paradigm to their benefit and to very specific ends. Once you've awakened to their antics, it's very much like the end of Matrix 1, where Neo finally sees the agents and the Matrix as a whole for what it truly is. The globe-shaped world spinning around the sun we believe to be obvious, true, and correct is really a theoretical fantasy, enforced by the mass media and the federal school system, also known as Operation Make Everyone Dumb as Fuck, and I'll abbreviate that as O.M.E.D.A.F. So maybe the literal depiction at the end of the Matrix 1 isn't exactly true, but it's one hell of an accurate analogy, to be very honest. The little square box that's been in everyone's living room for the last several decades and on the big screen for the last 100 years has been the guiding force behind the direction of our society in general, which is a very scary thought indeed. People believe they are free and independent, but if you're told what to think, how to think, what to buy, and how you should view certain topics, specifically the shape of our world, how free are we really? Operation Make Everyone Dumb as Fuck is the perfect balance to the idiot box designed to program us because they teach our children to follow orders, color inside the lines, and do not think outside the pre-approved box. Tests are designed to gauge one's ability to memorize information and regurgitate it on demand. Would you like fries with that? Whether that information is true or correct makes no difference to O.M.E.D.A.F, as long as the specific paradigm shoveled into the minds of all the children is the same across the board. So, this programming that I'm describing has been an all-out assault on our senses since we were very young, and has increased in intensity, effectiveness, perversity, and callousness incrementally so that people wouldn't really notice the changes. Sort of like boiling a frog, if you're familiar with the analogy. Now, the vast majority of the world sees the programming as the absolute, irrefutable truth. They will believe essentially anything that is said on the idiot box or what is relayed to them via Operation Make Everyone Dumb as Fuck, since it was asserted to them by a figure or a device which they trust inherently. In the case of the idiot box, people will even subscribe to ideas subliminally suggested to them in a completely fictional movie without them even knowing it. That's how hypnotic suggestion works. Your mind is wooed into a malleable, suggestible state wherein your, quote, rational mind is intensely focused on the plot of the movie, or possibly not focused on anything at all, but you're taking in all sorts of secondary information relayed to you by the master craftsmen who made the movie, cartoon, documentary, or advertisement, whether you like it or know it or not. People will say this is hogwash, quote, conspiracy theory, but I'm sorry to say that it is indeed very true. The CIA and other secretive Freemasonic alphabet organizations within the government have a very real, vested interest in keeping our people dumb as fuck and content with their fiat currency and popcorn. Bread and circus was the TV of Rome, but the idea is still very much the same. Divide and conquer. Sure, on the macroscopic level, the idiot box does a very good job of dividing us all into an infinite number of groups. It's very easy to pit the unwashed masses against one another, but more importantly and more difficultly, to divide and conquer an individual's mind. If you can do that, then you're onto something. Truly, by putting ourselves at odds with our own self, they create the perfect type of mind to be controlled. Mushed up and mashed up, our minds are easily led down propaganda lane, taking in all the subliminal programming without even realizing it. And the next thing you know, you have an entire world believing it's cool to shoot people in the head for the fuck of it, or that it's illogical to assume that we live on anything but a spinning globe hurling through space a gazillion miles per hour. Thanks to the lying Freemasons of NASA and the like, we found ourselves in a world where science is trumped by pretty pictures, and the rational, skeptical scientists of the world will vehemently defend an unproven theory such as gravity as a known fact. Certainly, scientists are far more entrenched into Operation Make Everyone Dumb as Fuck. They're at O.M.E.D.A.F 2.0 or higher education, while the average Joe of the masses is far more entrenched into the idiot box side of the programming. Both of the methods are powerful in their own right, but couple them together and you have a situation where even a rational, scientific, very smart person can be totally misled starting at a phase in their life when they believed in the Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy or the Easter Bunny. When NASA faked the moon landing, they spread their lies liberally across O.M.E.D.A.F and the idiot box alike for decades. They essentially caused a hotly debated false theory to become the absolute irrefutable truth. In truth, NASA is a pack of lying Freemasons who designed the Apollo mission films to trick the world. People always seem to think there's no motive for this. What could they possibly gain from such a fantastic lie? Why would the government want us to believe we live on an enclosed system with no escape, where they hold all the keys to all the power and we can simply stay put and that's it? Firstly, I should state that people in general are inherently good. They want to do the right thing most of the time and will tell you the truth under most normal circumstances. Most people love their children, their neighbors, and honestly wouldn't do anything to hurt a fly or deceive a child. Granted, those same people will tell their children that Santa is real and will probably smack a fly, but they were also programmed to do so and don't see the harm in it, so that's really a topic for another discussion. Suffice to say, if you do lie to your children about Santa, the Easter Bunny, or the Tooth Fairy, It's probably best if you tell them it's a game going in, it's not for real, and you're just doing it for fun. It's probably not a good idea to lie to your children for the duration of their formative years about something you know to be a total lie. The, quote, religious holidays have nothing to do with Christ or Christianity if you're a Christian. Again, I'm sort of straying off topic here, but just so you know, Easter is the worship of Ishtar, the pagan fertility goddess, where in ancient rituals they would dye eggs in the blood of a sacrificed virgin on the spring equinox. Just saying. But back to the topic, the spinning globe model, which we assert to our children as a fact, is actually a long series of lies that were designed to trick the entire world into believing we live on a finite enclosed system with literally no escape. If the entire world believes or, quote, knows that we live on a spinning sphere hurling through space, then the world becomes a boring, scary place where material possessions trump compassion, generosity, or empathy for your neighbor, and a worthless fiat currency becomes the end game for criminals and doctors alike. Could you imagine traveling to an alien civilization where the inhabitants appear to be intelligent and good-hearted, but would literally kill or at least deceive one another in order to accrue greater amounts of worthless paper? People seem to think that money makes the world go round, which it doesn't, and that if you don't make enough money, then you're somehow less of a person than the rich guy down the street. Could you imagine if our world evaluated love or empathy as highly as they do the Benjamins? What a wonderful world it would be. In truth, the very money we spend is a spell, designed to make people go crazy and worship or lust after a piece of paper that isn't worth the money it takes to print it. People evaluate money above all else and essentially worship money. The day has come where you cannot live without the addictive, worthless spell called cash. But money isn't the only spell we're under. We've all been tricked since the time we were very young and gullible to believe a lie that states we live on a spinning globe. It's a very deep psychological observation to make, but once you realize our world is flat and stationary and is nothing like the wandering stars we can view orbiting the magnetic center, do you see how uncomfortable the idea of living on such a globe will make you feel? The globe Earth is a dangerous, scary, lonely, boring place with no escape. Sort of like a prison, but a prison for your mind. Indeed, the spinning globe is one of the most powerful forms of mind control, and is reinforced by all other forms of mind control built into our society. It goes way beyond the idiot box and Operation Make Everyone Dumb as Fuck, the schooling, because all things that happen on our world happen on the globe world. It makes it appear as if we need to worry about things like overpopulation, or not enough food, or global warming, fuel crises, etc. The globe causes scarcity of the worst kind, and that scarcity causes greed to skyrocket and compassion to bottom out. The enclosed system makes manipulating the masses a piece of cake, and the powers that be have our minds right where they want them. Our society and the world at large is beyond sick. This is by design. The masters of this world understand control of the mind very well. Did you know the word government literally translates to mind control? It's very sad to see people revert to the programming since they're comfortable with it, but if you can possibly consider the facts surrounding the flat earth, if only for hypothetical conversation, then you may have a chance to understand the truth, and you will not be perpetually stuck in propaganda land being led by the nose in any direction they want you to go. I urge everyone to consider the facts surrounding the true, correct, flat earth model, and please try to put the toy globe down for a scientific scrutiny. You will find that the globe model is rife with all sorts of contradictions and fallacies, and the flat earth model is really quite sound and logical, and explains all the contradictions regarding the globe model. Some of this will be a recap of my other vids, while some of it may be a slightly new take on things. The fact that we can see buildings from about sea level, vertical, perpendicular to the horizon from over 50 miles away, proves that our world is definitely not a globe. The ground level should drop 8 inches per mile squared away from the observer's eye. The fact that we can see such buildings from 50 miles away with the aid of a telescope literally disproves the globe model completely. But still, people cling to the model and discard this fact that is right in front of their face. If you do not understand perspective, it causes distant objects to get smaller and smaller until they reach the vanishing point, or the horizon. The horizon is where the earth and sky meet, and objects that travel beyond that point will get exponentially smaller. People state that if the world were flat, we should be able to see Europe from the east coast of the US, about 3,500 miles away. In truth, the coast of Europe and all of the skyscrapers there would be microscopic from 3,500 miles away, and the opacity of the atmosphere at that distance would make them invisible, even if they didn't get so small to be microscopic. If you've ever viewed a mountain range, the mountains further in the distance appear to be grayer and grayer, because more atmosphere is between your eye and the object. Imagine 3,500 miles of atmosphere, and the laws of perspective causing objects to get so very microscopically small at that distance, it's really no surprise at all that we cannot see Europe from the east coast, even on a clear day on the flat earth. The laws of perspective make it easy to trick people into thinking we live on a globe, but that's all it is a trick. Our world is definitely not spinning. A 2,500-mile flight from New York to LA will be identical in duration to its return flight. If you think about this logically, the two flights should be wildly different in terms of duration, if the ground below is spinning over 1,000 miles per hour towards the east. People will argue that everything is spinning in accordance with the Earth, right down to the molecules of air floating many miles above the surface. The fact is, a vacuum cannot exist next to a gaseous substance without something separating the two. So, by definition, the globe model is a fantasy where space is a vacuum adjacent to our atmosphere without anything separating the two. But back to the planes. Since this seems to be something people simply cannot understand without it being spelled out for them. If the westbound flight from New York to LA is spinning about 1,000 miles per hour eastward before takeoff, the instant the tires leave the runway and the jet engines begin to propel the plane west in the opposite direction of the spin, at what point does the plane break free of the eastward spinning lent to it by the Earth with the tires planted firmly upon the ground? Never? The second law of motion states an object in motion will tend to maintain its velocity until enacted upon by some other force. With all due respect, wouldn't several jet engines attached to the plane count as some other force? Even if the plane is spinning with the Earth at 1,000 miles per hour before takeoff, when the plane heads west traveling in the opposite direction of the spin, the plane is traveling at a max rate. For argument's sake, we'll say it's 500 miles per hour, but if you do the math, most planes make the journey from New York to LA at an average rate of 458 miles per hour, but we'll say 500 to make it a round even number. However, if the Earth is also spinning east at 1,000 miles per hour, the westbound flight should be very short, since the destination should be racing towards the plane, which is not connected to the spinning Earth any longer, and the engines are indeed propelling it through the air in the opposite direction as the spin. On the return flight, the plane going east from LA would need to race against the spinning Earth going 1,000 miles per hour, and would also need to beat that spin by a full 500 miles per hour to ensure the flights have identical duration. But wait, that's not even accurate, because an eastbound plane would need to do 1,500 miles per hour through the air to keep up with the spin and overtake that spin by 500 miles per hour. The westbound flight would actually have to fly backwards at 500 miles per hour in order to account for the Earth racing towards it at 1,000 miles per hour and ensure that the two flights have identical duration. The fact that the two flights are indeed identical in duration proves that the world is not spinning at any rate whatsoever. People will argue that the atmosphere is spinning with the Earth at 1,000 miles per hour to the east, which is totally asinine. These people must think that a 20-mile-per-hour westbound wind is actually a 980-mile-per-hour eastbound wind. Furthermore, the fastest wind ever recorded on the Earth was about 302 miles per hour in a tornado. The simple truth is, there are no 1,000 miles per hour winds on our world. If that were the truth, then all westbound flights would have to fight against a 1,000-mile-per-hour headwind, while all eastbound flights would enjoy a 1,000-mile-per-hour tailwind. Again, totally ridiculous, since airplanes traveling in opposite directions will never experience such winds. Ever. People say they can see the curve of the Earth from a plane or a mountaintop. In truth, the horizon is totally flat and horizontal. If you could gain enough altitude, say in a weather balloon with a camera, to see the horizon at 360 degrees around you, the horizon will be a flat and eye level regardless of altitude. Now, it will appear as a curve, but that's because you're viewing a flat, equidistant horizon all around you, which will make it appear as an equidistant circle around you. So it looks like a curve, but it's actually a flat surface. Furthermore, from a weather balloon camera, the higher up you get, the distant horizon should drop lower and lower as you can peer further out as altitude is gained. Once you get several miles into the air, you should see the horizon well below your line of sight and not at eye level all around you. The shots from the International Space Station, or super high altitude jumps as well, all use fisheye lenses to make all straight lines appear to curve in all sorts of directions. This is trick photography and is designed to mislead you. If you view such footage using a regular wide-angle lens, you'll see that the horizon does not curve around a ball and is flat, equidistant circle around your point of view. We are microscopic when compared to the world, so we can only observe a small portion of it at any given time. The laws of perspective affect our horizon or vanishing point, regardless of altitude, but high enough altitudes we can clearly see that our world is not a globe and is also not spinning. Gravity was a theory dreamed up by Freemasons who wanted to trick the world into believing we live on a globe. They did not want to subscribe to the creation account in Genesis, and so they essentially proved God was a liar when they, quote, proved we lived on a globe. As a Christian, I certainly subscribe to the conventional globe model, in spite of the fact that it was in direct contradiction to the Bible. I did not alter my faith nor my scientific beliefs due to this contradiction, although it appears that I should have. I should point out that this contradiction in belief within my own mind put me in a perfect state for mind control. What goes up must come down is a law of physics. Gravity was a theory to explain why we're not flung from the Earth at over 1,000 miles per hour standing near the equator. If you could somehow stand atop a spinning sphere, or on the side of it no less, you would need something holding you down to the surface. Gravity is supposedly that force which pushes down on me with exactly 175 pounds of force near the equator, where I'm standing perpendicular to the axis, spinning over 1,000 miles per hour. Truly, that is a great deal of downward pressure, and it would need to be balancing me against the outward thrust generated by the spin of the Earth. I've pointed this out before, but you must realize that if you travel to the North Pole where you're standing parallel to the axis and not spinning at all, the amount of gravity pushing down upon me at the equator would literally squash me like a bug. We're talking about enough force to keep me pinned to the Earth, standing perpendicular to the axis and spinning over 1,000 miles per hour, remember? That amount of force would be overwhelming if we stood near the North Pole, where we're parallel to the axis and not spinning. It wouldn't cause you to weigh a little bit more. It would cause you to weigh many thousands of times more, and no amount of arguing will change this. When the globe model was being theorized, people didn't have the technology to travel to the North Pole and weigh themselves. Indeed, the first person supposedly to travel to the North Pole was in the early 1900s, and even that is debated. The conquest of the North Pole was for many years credited to U.S. Navy engineer Robert Peary, who claimed to have reached the pole on the 6th of April in 1909, accompanied by Matthew Henson and 4 Inuit men. However, Peary's claims remain highly disputed and controversial. Now, these guys were mariners on an expedition and probably didn't weigh themselves to prove or disprove the globe model. They just wanted to get there and eat snow cones or whatever it is they do there. So, in theory, the globe model would fall apart if we weighed about the same at the North Pole versus the equator. When I was in science class as a child, I remember being told that the barometric pressure above me was pushing down on me with whatever I happened to weigh on a scale. I remembered thinking to myself, even then as a small child, probably 10 years old or so, but what about gravity? Isn't that also pushing down upon me along with the barometric pressure you're talking about? So I sort of let the question slide into the back of my mind as a strange coincidence about the globe model. So if people weigh slightly more at the North Pole, it could be explained by changes in barometric pressure, or the air pushing down upon me differently at the North Pole versus at the equator. That does tend to happen with major changes in temperature. But it certainly doesn't account for the major force of gravity pushing down upon me at the equator, keeping me pinned to the earth in spite of traveling 1,000 miles per hour to the east and again standing perpendicular to the axis. Anyone who tries to argue this point is a pseudoscientist or a shill, or they simply don't understand physics, geometry, rotational motion, or critical thought. People tend to think that since I'm pointing to evidence of the flat Earth, that I'm somehow stating the moon and sun are also flat. The theory is the flat Earth theory, which is true and correct and has nothing to do, as far as I'm concerned, with the sun or the moon being flat disks. There are some flat earthers who believe that the sun and moon are flat disks. I could be wrong about this. Indeed, I could be. But I believe the sun and moon are spherical and massive objects, not nearly as far away or as massive as told in the conventional model. Again, we can use Euclidean geometry to estimate the distance of the sun, which I've detailed in one of my other videos. The end of the world, the globe is being crushed. The moon and the sun can accurately be measured as about 35 miles in diameter and about 3,000 miles away. Something is apparently causing them to orbit the magnetic center of the known universe, which is fixed upon our North Pole. This force appears to be electromagnetic and could be explained by quantum locking, which is a magnetic phenomenon with supercharged objects. The one single picture of Earth from space, quotes, Earth from space, courtesy of the lying Freemasons of NASA, is obviously perfectly spherical, just like the sun and the moon. Now, modern science states that our world is definitely not perfectly spherical, but rather an oblate spheroid or even a pear-shaped spheroid. If that's the case, then why are the sun and moon perfect spheres? They too are supposedly spinning around in space, which makes the notion of oblate spheroids totally laughable. And furthermore, what about the perfect sphere shot by NASA in the one single picture of the Earth from space? That was a perfect sphere, so that must have been a hoax, even according to Neil deGrasse Tyson. The sun and moon are indeed mysterious, but we can surmise that they are probably not flat disks. The only reason the world is disc-shaped at all is because the sun orbiting the magnetic center in a giant, flat, oscillating circle has carved out a giant disc shape in the infinite plane, which is covered by a very thick sheet of ice. Remember the last ice age? Perhaps the sun had a slightly different path than we currently see now, causing the ice to be a little bit more prevalent on the face of the Earth. Makes a lot of sense. A lot more discussion and scientific observation need to be done in terms of the sun and moon, but we can safely say that the flat Earth model doesn't necessarily mean that the sun and moon are flat disks. Our world is inherently different to what we can see in the sky. We are stationary, flat, and the magnetic center, which everything revolves around, is fixed upon our North Pole. The Idiot Box and Operation Make Everyone Dumb as Fuck have done an excellent job of removing creativity and rational thought from our society. If the idiot box and O.M.E.D.A.F repeat something loudly enough and enough times, a total lie can become a quote known fact, and anyone who dares question the theories vomited forth by the mind control programming will be labeled as stupid, since everyone knows Jay-Z is the best rapper and everyone knows the earth is a globe. Everyone acts the same, dresses the same, talks the same, and worships the same thing: money and the programming and the idols on the idiot box. People worship celebrities or idols, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. However, it's the norm in a world full of mind-controlled sheeple, blissfully ignorant with the beer, bread, and circus, gracefully provided by the Freemasonic liars who control the public's mind.